Nintendo has announced they're online and confirmed the Virtual Console is no longer a thing. Not that this is really a surprise, they were hinting this way for a while. Perhaps not that they were going to go as far as they are going though. The thing is, ditching the Virtual Console model kind of makes sense and needed to happen. I don't know that they aren't going to replace it with something that is bad in other ways, but no one can say. So let's look at the fundamental problems the Virtual Console had. First, something many have brought up, every game was packaged with its own standalone emulator. It's like making a pot of rice and having a plate for each grain. Soon your entire house is covered in plates when you only needed one. This led to tiny NES games adding up to gigabytes in no time. This needed fixing. Second, it is weird and counterproductive to create a bottleneck for third-party content. The Virtual Console required third parties to go through Nintendo to get their classic games re-released. Third parties couldn't just decide it was time to release one of their classic games. They had to go through Nintendo and wait for new Virtual Consoles to be added. From everything we know of the NES service, third parties don't seem involved, and this has given them some more options. Hamster got right on porting games from SNK systems and arcade games to Switch. We have the so professional sounding Johnny Turbo releasing other arcade games, and some companies like SNK and Capcom are releasing collections. We also have the developers of Ikaruga porting their GameCube classic to Switch, wholesale, as a budget title. And THQ is releasing their De Blob games, originally Wii games, on Switch. Even Nintendo themselves are porting Wii and Wii U games to Switch. Another issue was price. You can argue N64 games are worth about $10 each, but it's harder to argue that for NES and SNES games being at $5 and $8. What Nintendo is doing with the NES service, making you download all their NES games for $20 or $4.40 a year, if you subscription scum with your friends, is bringing the mathematical price down to $4 or 22 cents at its launch. And the mathematical price is going to drop more and more as more games are rolled out. Assuming they fix the emulator issue, having the entire NES library downloaded, as will be mandatory, isn't going to come close to a gigabyte. And that annual $20 or $4.40 is probably going to bring in way more annually than the NES Virtual Console ever did. People who buy NES games will buy the big games, maybe spend $10 to $30 on average, and many of the less popular ones won't be bought. So $20 every year from people who wouldn't have spent $5 for even Zelda and Mario Bros. 3 is going to be more than all the people who did buy a handful. They could also ask people to download the entire first-party SNES and Game Boy libraries as well, and eliminate the overpriced issue a lot of games on those systems will suffer from at Virtual Console prices. I think these two are likely additions. Even Game Boy Advance could work, though not ideally, but there are issues starting with N64 and DS. N64 games can be over 50 megabytes. Just 20 games could reach or exceed a gigabyte, and DS games skyrocket into hundreds of megabytes, with one approaching half a gigabyte. By GameCube, games are usually at or above a gigabyte, so Nintendo cannot reasonably ask anyone to download every first-party N64, DS, or GameCube game, and cannot have a similar service for those platforms. There are a few more issues though, specifically N64 and DS games. Take a look at the N64 controller. Yeah, it looks like a uterus, but no, I'm talking about the 4 camera buttons. N64 games have a digital camera. You can't control exactly how the camera moves, you can just nudge it in a direction. But the thing is, we have camera sticks now, and it is awkward to control a digital camera with a stick, and it isn't a simple task to rewrite the code to support a stick in an emulated N64 game. The DS has the issue of a strange aspect ratio that is much taller than any display, We can rotate the Switch, but you'll need something to prop it up, and if we need to touch and use controllers at the same time, how is that going to work with it propped up? Sure, Nintendo could hypothetically create a monstrosity of a shell. You slide into the Joy-Con rails, and then it juts below the Switch and has rails so you can attach the Joy-Cons along the long side and hold it on its side. But really, an accessory to play emulated games? And how would it work docked? Touching in the orientation? Wii would be no sweat. The Joy-Cons have gyro and are basically improved Wii remotes. Talented developers have even shown the Switch gyros are so good you can emulate pointing and use gesture controls at the same time. For this reason, there's a good chance a lot of N64, DS, GameCube, and 3DS games will get remakes or remasters if they could use some of these improvements. If they go to the trouble of adding camera stick controls, why not just remake Mario 64 and Sunshine and Odyssey's engine? A nice clean Mario, updated textures, smoothed world polygons, and a native modern camera. Maybe that's why we have a low-poly courtyard in Mario Odyssey. They were testing how dropping a map in would work. You know, plenty of Nintendo fans would be all too excited to play a Mario 64 remake. When it comes to DS and 3DS, they don't have much choice except to redesign the game to work with a single screen, and optional touching or let the games fade away. I don't see how WarioWare Touched can be redesigned, but other games, yeah. Custom Robo Arena could have a Soul Boost button and remove the cleaning mechanic. Metroid Prime Hunters could be remade to work like the Wii games, and Golden Sun could use gesture controls. Kid Icarus could be translated as a tri-stick shooter using gyro aiming for the third stick. GameCube stuff, on the other hand, could be remade or just remastered into HD at their discretion. Some games should ideally find a solution to the native analog triggers, but a simple solution would be to make that exclusive to the GameCube adapter and have L and R be 50% down, and ZL and ZR be 100% down. While we don't know what Nintendo's plan is, this could be a huge improvement, reducing how much space games take up, fixing the discrepancy of price of doing business versus actual value, and see great classics be remade to look and play better than ever. What do you think about this whole topic?